This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
Hi, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. It's Bill Bartholomew here with you for new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. And, of course, you can check the archive of nearly 300 episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, ripodcast.com, or wherever you like to listen. All right, so today we have a story that really touched me. You know, this is something that made me really sad when I heard about it the day of and in the days following, and that is the fire that occurred on April 1st at Foster Parrots in Hopkinton, Rhode Island. And Foster Parrots, they're a wildlife sanctuary that specializes in caring for parrots that were either captured in the wild or were bred in captivity, but then for one reason or another were abandoned. And this is a cause that some of you may know is near and dear to my heart. You know, I try not to go on and on about it, but the reality is I'm an animal lover, and I'm somebody who is strongly against the trafficking of wild animals, the captivity of wild animals, and also the type of people that work inside these types of organizations. You know, they tend to be the types of humans that we need more of. So when I heard about this terrible fire on April 1st, when I was driving into the studio here and I flipped on WPRO News, I heard Steve Klampkin covering it, and it just broke my heart. They lost 96 birds in this fire. They were able to rescue, or I shouldn't say rescue, they were able to save over 300 birds. But nonetheless, just an absolutely tragic event. And it sort of elevated the conversation around the captivity of birds, number one. And number two, this organization that exists here in our state that's doing work that has a global impact. So I wanted to bring somebody on from the organization, and today we have Danika Oriol-Morway, who's been with them since 2014, to talk about the fire itself, the preventative measures that helped to save the 300-plus birds that were able to be saved in this event, how you out there can help this organization right now in this time of need, and then also to sort of highlight that conversation around captive birds and wildlife in general. So this is one of those episodes that we veer away from politics and sort of highlight great or interesting things happening here in the Ocean State. But it's also a highly relevant conversation because this is something that I think as a society, it's time we take a closer look at. And we're starting to examine things. You know, 2020 taught us a lot about our societal infrastructure in terms of social justice and how that impacts a number of areas, right? Community police relations, access to health care, severe outcomes, so on and so forth. All of these things are on the table. And my hope is that if nothing else comes out of this horrible tragedy that took place at Foster Parrots, people will at least start to talk about, you know, hey, where are we going? As we start to rebuild and we talk about the new normal and all of that, where does wildlife, where do creatures that are non-human fit into that conversation? And also getting away from the idea that, you know, like if you're vegan or you're pro-animal or whatever, pro-animal rights, that you're somehow, you know, off the grid, you know, some kind of social justice warrior, et cetera, et cetera. But this is actually a conversation that all of us can have and we can all learn from, and we can all find a way to move forward on in a better way that's more appropriate for nature itself. And it wouldn't take any significant shifts other than some kind of predisposed mentality that it's appropriate for a parrot or a macaw or a toucan to be locked inside a cage for amusement, which it's not. And hopefully this episode, and more broadly speaking, the incident at Foster Parrots, will start to elevate that conversation here in Rhode Island, where we now have an opportunity to be a leader in this global conversation. So that's coming up today in just a few moments. Again, this was sort of an emotional episode. I'm not going to lie. I mean, again, this is a personal situation where this story really impacted me, man. You know, it really made me sad. And I know other reporters that covered this particular story were also really impacted by it. And I read the comments in the Westerly Sun and some of the other news organizations locally, hyper-locally in South County that were on the ground for this. I mean, it was powerful stuff. And what I was able to take away is that the community as a whole, when you're talking about Charahoe, South County, Washington County, Rhode Island, no matter how far you want to zoom out, is behind the relief and recovery efforts of this organization. So we get into a whole bunch of stuff in this matter today. here on B-Town, and it's a pleasure to have you on board. As always, a couple of things going on in Rhode Island right now. Yesterday, I was at a press conference. Governor McKee, Secretary Stefan Pryor, Commerce Secretary Stefan Pryor, and a number of other people announcing new small business relief grants in the form of $5,000 grants to eligible small businesses with an application period opening up on Thursday, April 15th. You can watch the video from that. I was live on the scene. You can watch that inside the Bartholomew Town Podcast Facebook group. Or if you have any questions, you can email me, bill@ripodcast.com. Also, some more sad news. We got word on Sunday that Rhode Island indie and country music promoter, Rhode Island Country Music Hall of Fame inductee, somebody who's been a massive supporter of so many artists and venues here in this state, and someone who had a profound impact on my life, Bill McGrath, passed away due to COVID-19 on Sunday. And Bill McGrath, he was one of those Rhode Islanders that lifted people up and didn't ask for anything in return. It didn't really matter your backstory. If you believed in the power of music and the power of community, Bill McGrath had your back. It didn't matter your politics. It didn't matter really even what type of music you made or what type of music you'd like to go see or listen to in general. McGrath had your back, and he lifted people up. And he's been battling COVID for about a month now and had a very severe outcome, obviously death resulting, as I just said. But Bill McGrath, again, somebody who had a personal impact on me, and I know so many of you out there, if you love live music in the state, whether you know it or not, Bill McGrath had an impact on you as well. I remember when we first started coming up to Rhode Island, I was still living in New York, and we were coming up to perform like sometimes once a week. We just started to realize, the band started to realize, hey, we want to be a part of what's going on in Providence and what's going on in Newport, maybe even more so than Brooklyn. And we started playing these like VFW shows that Bill McGrath would book, and he would bring in us or me, more of like an alt country type of indie rock type of thing, and pair us up with a band of like guys in their 80s who were playing traditional country. And we would just put on these magical shows. And I happened to be wearing, I can't remember if I was wearing flip-flops or Doc Martens or whatever, but Bill McGrath, he pulled me outside after one of these shows, and he gave me a pair of his old cowboy boots. And he was like, hey man, wear these. You don't have to fake your way that you're from Texas and you are a cowboy, but for stage value, try these out. And those are some magical times right there. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Bill McGrath, a great Rhode Islander, rest in peace. And we'll have more on that probably as the summer comes around. I'm sure there'll be some tribute shows. Okay, for now, let's get to today's story. Foster parrots, the terrible fire, Danika, Oriol-Morway. Today we're talking about a story that, I was driving on the morning of this incident, and I heard it on the radio that there was a fire at a parrot sanctuary off in the Chickadee Farms region, which for listeners who aren't familiar, that's Hopkinton. That's sort of the Charahoe general area. There's a golf course over there. It's nestled in the woods. And I grew up in Charahoe. I grew up in Charlestown, so I'm intimately familiar with that part of the world. I didn't know about the parrot sanctuary. Some people also may be aware that one of my pet peeves, if you will, is the trafficking of birds. And I think it's just, I have this poster that I made one time that said bird trafficking is a coward's game. And I drew this macaw, it's just a disgusting and horrendous thing. Of course, I'm vegan, and I try not to preach about my personal opinions about things, but I think if you have a pet bird that especially if you're mistreating it, that is just as low as it gets. So lo and behold, Foster Parrots is an organization that is an animal sanctuary specializing in, I guess you would call, exotic birds. And there was a terrible incident a few weeks ago, a fire that took the lives of 80 birds. And, now you're just picking up the pieces. You're trying to figure out where to go from here. But there's a lot of things we can talk about here. First of all, how the community can help. Second of all, the preparation that you had already installed that prevented this from becoming much more tragic. and I guess a little bit of backstory on the sanctuary as well. So welcome to the podcast. Really appreciate it. I know it's a really busy time for you. So I guess introduce yourself and then let's get right into it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. So obviously my name's Danika, and I sit on the board of directors at Foster Parrots. I'm the treasurer of the board, but I was the previous sanctuary director for 5.5 years. I came on board at Foster Parrots in 2014. So a lot of the work that we did in preparation for a fire, we did over my tenure with Foster Parrots. So they've been very close to the organization still. Obviously, I no longer work there, but I'm still dedicated to the cause, to the people, and most importantly, to these animals. A little bit of backstory on Foster Parrots and why we exist. Foster Parrots has been in existence for over 35 years. Our founder is Mark Johnson. He actually started his sanctuary in a pottery studio in Cambridge, Mass. And it was one of those sort of your classic sanctuary stories. It just starts with somebody who has an aha moment when they realize that there's a problem and these animals are suffering and there's no resource for them. Municipal shelters don't have the ability to take care of parrots. They're very specialized diets, housing, temperature. I mean, these are equator species. They're not meant to be in New England. So what they need is more than what most people and facilities can accommodate. So Mark, he started rescuing these animals, outgrew his studio very quickly, moved to a barn in Rockland. And they were there for many years and once again outgrew that facility. And that's when they ended up in 2007 moving down to Rhode Island and took over the original Chickadee Farms facility, which many people in the area are familiar with. I can't tell you how many people I've met over the years who have said, I used to work there when I was in high school, or I used to work, and it's been an amazing community connector to have that history with the Hope Valley and Hopkinton community. But it's also a really poetic evolution in the sense of now it's the sanctuary for birds and we have chickens, and it's a place where these animals are treated with respect, autonomy, as much freedom as we can offer despite still being a facility, and to use their plight as a way to teach the world that no wild animal and absolutely no flighted wild animal should live its life in a cage. These are wild animals, and we've forgotten that. We assume that they're domesticated species. They're not domesticated like a cat or a dog. Just like you said, these are trafficked animals. Probably about a third of the animals at Foster Parrots were once born and, lived in the wild, were born in the wild, and were ripped from their families, their communities, from their natural habitats to live in a cage by themselves in someone's living room apartment. It's what parrots go through in captivity is such a crime against animals. And most people don't even realize it. And it's not out of this inherent cruelty to hurt these animals, but the public just doesn't realize that, it's not okay to put a flighted animal in a cage. It's nature's greatest gift, flight. I mean, just think about that. And we trim their wings so they can't fly, and we stick them in cages and we separate them from bonded pairs and families. And what Foster Parrots and the New England Exotic Wildlife Sanctuary is doing is saying, we need to stop this. We need to stop the trafficking of parrots. We need to stop the captive breeding of parrots, and we need to honor them where they're supposed to be, which is in their natural place in the wild. And what we do is really a symptom of a problem. We're not the solution. Sanctuaries are not the ultimate solution. The solution is to end the trade, to end the keeping of animals in cages. And, it's what happened the other day was absolutely such a tragedy and was everyone's worst possible nightmare. But if there's any solace in this for anyone, is that, it's putting this conversation on a national, if not global stage, and giving parrots an opportunity to really be addressed in what's happening to them. So that's what we do. I don't want to say in a nutshell. I feel like that was a little long-winded. I'm sorry.
No, you could have gone on forever. I would listen to you for a full day because, that it's such a, I spend, I was going to say a lot, but an above average amount of time, I guess, in Brazil. And, I was out exploring in 2019. And of course, in my trips there, I've seen toucans and, you name it. But at one point I was out pretty deep off the grid and I looked up, and one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life, perhaps the closest I've ever come to like flirting with an alternate reality or whatever, was I looked up and I saw 3 macaws. They looked like, first of all, they looked like pure gold in the sky. but they looked exactly like fighter planes in motion. And it's in this unbelievable area, right on the border of the rainforest, this kind of plateau area. And it absolutely took my breath away. And that's an expression, but it physically took my breath away. And it just like made me think, wow, this world is just so deep and there's so much here. And you mentioned autonomy, and all animals, whether it's, a fly through a lion, there's autonomy there. And it's over this notion that like you're some kind of like social justice warrior or some kind of like far left nutcase or whatever. If you want to protect that autonomy, it's got to end. And that starts with trafficking. And it's a disgusting practice that I hope, if nothing else comes out of this tragedy at foster parrots, people start to realize, oh, wow, how did we get here for amusement or, sort of phony companionship? We've taken these beautiful free creatures and locked them in cages. It's and it also plays in, there are zoos that serve as sanctuaries, but there are also zoos that are purely for entertainment. And there's a lot of questions there as well. But getting back to the fire itself, let's talk about that morning. When did you get the call, and what did you your worst fears, and were they confirmed?
Yeah. I'm going to try really hard to keep it together because it's fresh.
Yeah.
So I lived at foster parrots for 5.5 years, and fire is, anybody who runs a sanctuary is responsible for animals. It's your number one fear. And I've worked at other sanctuaries that, forest fires, building fires, brush fires. These are all because you have no control and you have no warning when a fire strikes. And in the morning, it was April 1st, about probably 5:30 in the morning, I get a phone call from Karen Windsor. She's the executive director and my partner in crime and dear friend. And she's screaming, she's hysterical on the phone. And she says, the building's on fire. And I live up in Boston right now. So I, jumped out of bed. We're still in our pajamas, threw some rain boots on. And I'm just thinking, okay, it's just going to be, maybe it's like just a spot fire and they're putting it out. And, so I'm going through all these narratives in my head that it's going to be okay. We've got the whole house fire alarm system that's directly connected to the fire department. They've been through the building. They know the place. They know the animals. They know the staff. And, so I kept telling myself it's gonna be okay. We're prepared for this. We've done these walkthroughs. We know, we've got fire extinguishers, fire doors. We've got, we did all these things. And so I'm using this as like a mantra in the 1.5-hour drive it took me to get down there. And when I get there, the building's gone. And I didn't expect that. I did not, I realized how naive I am when it comes to fire and how unpredictable and violent fire is. And so when I got there in the fire department, what they ended up doing is they created, I can't remember the term, but they essentially had to focus on stopping the spread because the fire was so big. And they basically created this sort of water firewall. And because of that, they saved 300 animals. And our fire department, it wasn't just, it was every fire department in the surrounding area, and then into Connecticut, I believe. And, we're still trying to figure out all the people involved to thank them. But because of their action, they stopped the spread. You're probably familiar with these buildings. They're really long corridor chicken coop buildings. And, fire, it could just take over. It was in the attic, and unfortunately it overtook the building within minutes. And, somebody told me recently, fire doubles in size every 30 seconds. I didn't know that. And I thought we would always be prepared to evacuate the animals, but fire moves so quickly and there was no evacuating possible without endangering people. And, they tried. And one of the firefighters actually did manage to we had a series of cages in our kitchen, which was the last area to be truly scorched. And, that building, you'll probably see pictures on Facebook of it, but the roof is collapsed. It's destroyed, but one of the firefighters managed to he was shoveling these cages out of the way, and even walked out with one of our macaws, Rose, on his arm. And, I got to find him and thank him because that, I know that what he did, it saved those animals and they would not have survived that. But, the animals that did perish, they were special, unique, amazing animals that we have rescued and we have loved and we have tended to. And I never wanted to lose them this way. Nobody did. I think we did everything we could. In 2014, when I came on board, we started a series of upgrades in the building. We worked with the building inspector and the fire marshal and the fire chief, and they were amazing and they were great educators and showed us what do we do, because we're also open to the public. So we have to be code compliant. We've got, people come and visit. So making sure we've got ramps, ADA accessibility, fire doors, panic alarms, so you can get out of the building and we can evacuate. And, we put in the alarm system, we put in the fire extinguishers. We start replacing all these materials, that used to be wood, moving them to FRP, which is a fire retardant, wall product. And we're doing all these things. But the part of the sanctuary that burnt down, unfortunately, was the oldest part that hadn't yet gotten some of these upgrades. It had the whole house alarm system, which just, all I can just say is thank the universe. And, for just that, we put that in because it would have been a complete loss had we not had that system in place.
For breaking news and other content on a daily basis, follow me on Twitter at Bill Bartholomew. As it was, you lost 80 birds. Is that accurate?
It's actually 96. We just did a final count.
That is just so devastating. And, there's no other way to put it. But 300 were saved. You're moving forward. This organization is growing. What's in store now, and where does the facility stand, and where can people kind of turn to assist you in any way possible?
Great question. So we're absolutely rebuilding because what we do is so important, and there's so few organizations in the world, but in the New England area that do what we do, which is lifetime sanctuary for animals that are not, they're not meant to go into homes. These are animals that are distressed, abused, traumatized. These are animals that just want to be a wild animal. And unfortunately, they're going to live their life in a cage. So our job is to do right by them. But we've already started to receive surrender requests again. This is parrots. Most people don't realize, parrots are the third most popular pet in the country, but they don't last in the home. Yeah, it's shocking. And a lot of people don't realize that. And they, some of these species live 80 to 100 years. So you're talking about an animal that doesn't last in one home for more than 3 years on average, but has a lifespan of 80 to 100 years. That's an incredible amount of surrenders, rescues. So we can't go away. We can't just say, all right, we're done, we're traumatized, we're broken. We have to if we're going to honor these birds and those birds that were lost in that fire, we rebuild bigger, better, stronger, safer than we ever could have been. But the only way we can do that is with the support of our community, is through fundraising. And the reality is we are an entirely donation-based organization, and we have an amazingly dedicated supporter community, but we need more help. All the sanctuaries, all the rescues need more help, and they need general operating support. They need money to invest in these safety infrastructures. And this is one of the things we've been talking a lot about, is just where's the need? There's a lot of grants out there for, various programs, or to build an aviary and all these wonderful things. But what's actually really tough in this situation is we tried to get funding for a sprinkler system many, many times, but were declined. And we got really lucky. Bob Barker, actually from the DJ&T Fund, funded a partial request. And as a result, that's how we were able to install this whole house fire alarm system and build housing for staff on site to address any emergencies. But that was the closest we ever got to having someone fund our sprinkler system. And that's the type of funding we need. So we are looking at rebuilding. We need to, there's still birds that need our help. The birds that survived, they continue to need our help. We've dedicated ourselves to them. We've made a commitment to them. So, at this point, it's spread the word, to support organizations like Foster Parrots. In our case, yes, we need money to rebuild. Spread the word, don't put wild animals in cages. The reality is that this tragedy could have been avoided if we didn't have a problem of overpopulation of parrots in cages and in homes. And at the end of the day, the problem still persists, and we need to keep fighting that. And we need to end, the keeping of flighted animals in cages. So Spread the word, join, Facebook, Instagram, go to our website, tell your friends, tell your family. This tragedy, it becomes a second tragedy if we don't do right by it and don't let people know what happened and what's happening to birds. So please go visit our website. It's fosterparrots.com. You can find us on Facebook. Donate supplies, donate money, whatever you can, time, volunteer. Right now, actually, we do have a lot of volunteers. So we were sort of struggling with, we have a third of less building. We're still in generator power. But, when we rebuild, we're going to need all the help we can get. Our volunteers are our lifeline. They are what, give these animals that extra level of love and care. So it's a long-winded answer again, but, to spread the word, follow us on all the channels, donate. It's, and don't buy birds. Just don't buy birds. Don't buy birds. Adopt, don't shop if you feel the need. But we need to stop this problem from happening in the first place, and we need to rebuild and do right. So,
what organization or I guess portion of federal government, state government, whether it's DEM here in Rhode Island, like who should people advocate to tighten these restrictions on the import of wild birds? Like who can actually step in? And we see it sometimes like, oh, somebody got busted bringing turtles in from Asia or whatever it is. And I guess how often are there situations at airports or other crossings where these creatures are discovered, and how can we ramp that up? You don't want to say like, all right, let's have this broad crackdown or anything like that. But at the same time, there's got to be a targeted way that this can be done.
Mm-hmm. So there's sort of, I'd say, two ways to really look at it. You've got the USDA, which is really what's regulating the import of birds and the breeding of birds. And every once in a while, you'll see a case come up and, we'll need public comment. So that, if you're actually following foster parrots, we do keep people, up to date on sort of legal issues, on policy issues in regards to parrots. But one of the biggest things that, individually we can each do is, one, to not buy a bird, to encourage our friends and families to not buy birds, because the reality is, as long as parrots live in cages in our home, there's going to be this illusion that there's a demand for these parrots. And so there will still be the extraction of parrots from the wild, even though we're breeding parrots in captivity and, parrot mills and backyard breeders and all these things. A lot of people don't realize that these birds are still coming out of the wild. So a bird in a cage endangers birds in the wild, even if that bird was captive bred, because people don't realize that. They're not seeing that. They're seeing, hey, someone is still willing to pay money for that animal. I'm going to go take that and sell it. So we have to diminish the demand. Basic economics is kill the demand. If we don't buy birds, no one's going to keep taking them out of the wild, and people are going to stop breeding them. So we have, as individuals, that ability to spread that word to our friends, our family, and our communities. And that, I think, is one of the most powerful ways for us to sort of be advocates on the ground in our day-to-day life. Just live what you feel. If you don't think a bird should be in a cage, then, don't shop at places that sell birds. There are plenty of pet shops out there that do a phenomenal job, and they only, do adoption services. So don't buy birds. When school classrooms that have birds, encourage them, don't do that. You don't need to have birds for these kids to understand how to relate to animals. Your friends, your family, it can go a long way. I mean, I've already probably indoctrinated so many of my friends and family since I joined Foster Parrots about why you shouldn't have birds in cages. And for me, I had to really, I've always been an animal person. I've been working in animal welfare for years, but the parrot issue was such a unique and new a new channel for me to understand and really understand the complicated nature of wildlife in captivity, and that parrots fall in that weird gap of their wildlife, but we also treat them as companion animals. And it's this weird, conflict of interest that we have. So,
well, all I want to say is just thank you for the work that you're already doing, that you've been doing, your motivation and persistence to keep going, and the community as a whole mourns with you and is excited for what can come out of this in a positive manner. and the 96 birds that were lost will be a part of a messaging campaign that may actually get the ball rolling in a significant way to end this disgusting practice. At least put it on the map for people who are otherwise oblivious. But, in a time where there's so much, and we hear this such a cliche thing, oh, there's so much division, there's so much this, there really is, I've been covering COVID and social justice in depth for the last year. And it is, there are nights where I can't sleep just thinking about like the disagreements that we have on fundamentals. But this is something that the work you're doing is truly heroic because it rises above that. This goes, it goes way past that nonsense. And it's people like you and your team that are actually leaving a mark on this world for millennia to come. So I just thank you personally. And I'm sure the listeners, unless they're sick and demented, would also agree entirely with that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And you really hit it on the head with this one of, animal welfare. It crosses all lines. It's, people love animals and people don't want to see them suffer. And, it's not about politics. It's about being a decent, human and honoring this earth and the animals we cohabitate on this planet with and being true stewards. We're supposed to be tending to this, not hurting this. So, but thank you for your kind words, for your support, for inviting me on here. Normally I'm more articulate, but it's really hard to talk about this still, and trauma and grief does that to you, I realize. So I appreciate your patience and your grace in this conversation, because it's, but we will do right by those animals. We will. And we can only do that with the love and support of our community. And to Rhode Island and all the listeners, this is one of the most dedicated and warm, embracing communities I've ever been a part of. And Hope Valley, Hopkinton, the Charahoe area, Westerly, everyone has been just awesome. So thank you all.
Rhode Island's podcast of record, B-Town.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.